Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I'm a 2024 New York City Reducitarian Foundation Fellow. Today, I am so excited to be joined by Zoe Novic to explore how factory farming affects public health. Zoe is a graduate of Brandeis University and Yale School of Public Health. Her focus in public health works to improve human and animal lives and environmental injustices. Zoe has worked with impactful organizations including Peace Corp, Physicians Committee of Responsible Medicine, Greener by Default, and is the new executive director of her family's business, CAPE, Center for Animal Protection and Education. So, just to start, Zoe, do you mind telling me about the story of how you got to where you are and what inspired you to work in public health?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie. So to get to where I am today, we really have to start at the very beginning. I grew up on an animal sanctuary. My 6 months after I was born, my mom founded an animal rescue organization called CAPE, Center for Animal Protection and Education. And so I grew up surrounded by all kinds of different animals. Dogs and cats, chickens, goats, pigs, turkeys, donkeys, you name it. And so we grew up, or I grew up with this ethos of all living beings have a right to life and respect for all life. And I kind of grew up the like weird hippie kid. Um, but it was really this one chicken that came into my life when I was 5 years old that would have a pretty big impact on the way that I see the world. When I was 5 years old, we rescued a chicken named Strawberry. And Strawberry and I developed a really strong friendship or bond, the way that most people would develop a friendship or bond with their dog or cat. I spent almost every day after school hanging out with Strawberry. She would ride in the front basket on my bike when I would ride around the neighborhood. She would hang out sitting on my shoulder. We did almost everything together. And I could read her emotional cues and learned a lot about the social and emotional lives of chickens just by spending a lot of time with her. And through her, I learned more about the social and emotional lives of all farmed animals, and all animals in general. And when I was 13 years old, we went on a really big rescue mission. It was a lot of volunteers from CAPE and a few other animal sanctuaries. We were given special permission to enter an egg laying facility that was closing down in a town nearby. And so they were getting ready to send all of the chickens in their facility to slaughter, which is it's the norm for any egg laying facility. When their chickens are spent or done laying eggs, they get sent to slaughter. But this particular farmer, for whatever reason, contacted some local sanctuaries and said, "Hey, if you want to rescue some chickens, feel free to come in." And so I remember when I was 13 years old, we put on a bunch of really thick gloves and masks, and we went into this huge windowless warehouse. It was almost the size of like a football field. It was absolutely huge and really, really dark. There were no windows. And inside this warehouse, there were just rows and rows and rows and rows of wire cages. And inside each wire cage, there were about 6 to 8 chickens within each cage living on wires. So their feet and their feathers were really mangled. The cages were stacked on top of each other in like 3 or 4 tiers. So the chickens who were living on the top tiers were defecating on the chickens on the bottom tiers. And when we went in and we started, gently picking up each chicken that we could carry out in a kennel, lined with soft hay or a blanket, we found a lot of chickens who were living in these cages alongside or on top of dead chickens. The smell of this facility, I can still remember it to this day. It was, just decades and decades of feces. And the workers inside this facility, who also were wearing gloves and masks and everything, they had to spend their entire day here, picking through eggs and picking through chickens. Um, and I remember after we rescued as many hens as we could in the short amount of time that we were able to be in there, and we ended up rescuing 1,500 chickens on a farm that housed over 200,000. And the rest of the chickens that we weren't able to save, unfortunately, went to slaughter. But at the end of the day, we drove them back to the sanctuary and we watched as we opened the kennels and these chickens stepped out onto dirt and grass for the first time in their lives. And they felt sunshine on their faces and on their wings. And it was one of the most moving experiences, just thinking about my friendship with Strawberry, and what sort of normal habitat, an ideal chicken habitat that she got to live in, and the billions of chickens that are forced to live in these kinds of conditions, in our food system. And so as I got older, I started learning more about our food system and how the meat industry is really connected to the egg and dairy industry, and how that's connected to our climate and our environment and our human health. And eventually, after graduating from undergrad and doing the Peace Corps and having a few various roles in grassroots organizing and animal advocacy, I decided to get my master's in public health because I really wanted that systems perspective of like how each of these things interact with each other and how we can make a better system. And one of the main things that I learned in public health that we really only spent like maybe an hour talking about. So we'll come back to that about how we can update this public health education system. But one of the most impactful things that really stuck with me was this idea of One Health. And One Health is an approach in the field of public health that is the idea that human health is really interconnected and dependent upon the health of the environment and animal welfare. And this really stuck with me, and it makes so much sense, right?
Mhm.
Like the food system is an absolutely perfect example of One Health at play. Um, and it harkened back to some of those things that I saw in the egg laying facility that day of the workers that were there um, who were not necessarily treated the best, or they might have been disenfranchised individuals. So I'll leave it at there because I know we're going to cover quite a bit more. But my main takeaway from this experience in growing up surrounded by animals, really caring about animals, caring about their individual lives, and then zooming out and caring about our planet and our population health. Um, I really so strongly believe that we are all, no matter what field we're in, we're able to bring this One Health perspective into everything that we do, whether we do go into a public health field, or if we go into, if we become teachers or something that might not necessarily be an obvious like One Health field, we can bring this kind of lens and this kind of decision making into everything that we do. And I really truly think that not only is it imperative right now for the benefit of our population health and our planet, but it's imperative for our survival. So I'll leave it there, and we can dive into any more details that you want.
So I feel like public health for a lot of people, including myself, before I really started to learn about it, public health is so focused on like disease prevention. Like whenever I hear the word public health, I'm thinking of like pandemics or like vaccines or something like that. Like it's very specific to just illness. So like I just never really thought public health would include animals before this fellowship. Like I never thought, oh, animals would be part of our health. But it makes so much sense. Like a lot of people eat animal products. A lot of people are like around this type of culture all the time. And it's just something that's never part of our conscious. So I just find that crazy. And I would definitely want to go into how I feel like this type of topic should be talked about in schools because I don't think it's talked about at all. And considering the role that it has, I feel like more people should definitely know about it. Um, I want to go more into One Health. I know you started to already. I really feel like it's really good for people to have a term that they can use to refer to it because this concept made sense to me as I started to learn more in this fellowship, but I didn't have a term to put on this. Like, I just would call it like the interconnection of all living species. I'm like, this is a little bit long. But One Health is such a nice, like you know what it's talking about based on the word itself. I would like to kind of dive into that about how we can use this in different work. So like how are you using it to help animals or how can someone use this to help the environment? And also humans too.
Yes, I love that. And I want to echo exactly what you said of like having a term is so helpful. I to go back to what I said originally about like, I was kind of like a hippie kid in a hippie town in California. Um, Talking about like, oh yeah, like the interconnectedness of our planet and the animals and humans, like it can sound kind of woo-woo or
Mhm.
hippy-dippy. But when you have a scientific theory that's there, that's concrete, but also that we are literally experiencing in real time. We experienced it with COVID, and we're experiencing it now with bird flu, these zoonotic diseases. Factory farming is the literal perfect breeding ground for zoonotic diseases to spread from amongst animals who are tightly packed in really horrific, dirty, cramped conditions. So these diseases are more likely to spread between animals and, can easily adapt and change and become more effective. And then these diseases are more likely to spread from chickens to cows, which we've now seen with this strain of bird flu. And now it's spreading. There have been cases in humans. So we know that this is happening. We know that these factory farms, CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, also known as factory farms, these are really hotbeds of these kinds of conditions. And one of the ways that we try to prevent, or that farming systems try to prevent diseases from spreading, is they will feed the animals tons of antibiotics. In the US, antibiotics are given as a preventative measure because animals are living in such tight, cramped quarters. And one of the problems here is that antimicrobial resistance or antibiotic resistance on a global scale is becoming a really big major health threat. Public health professionals, scientists have been sounding the alarm for a number of years now that global antibiotic resistance is happening. Really simple um, bacteria and diseases are becoming harder and harder to treat because for humans, it's becoming harder and harder to treat in us because these bacteria are getting smarter and smarter and not becoming as susceptible to the antibiotics that we give them. And part of that is because, or a big part of that is because 73% of the antibiotics given globally are given to animals in farming systems. And so the effect of that on the global human population is that the more people are going to experience higher mortality rates, higher medical costs, and these diseases, really simple diseases that we've been treating for hundreds of years, are going to be nearly impossible to treat. So we're experiencing this in real time. The welfare of animals and the health of humans are interdependent. And then in terms of climate, environmental health, we also know that animal farming systems are a major cause of CO2 emissions, methane emissions, climate change, also a huge source of water pollution. There's a, a big issue of water waste contamination from these major farms. There's a lot of pollution to waterways, and especially for the communities living nearby these farms or nearby these slaughterhouses, where there's a lot of, economically disenfranchised communities who don't have the economic power to move. And so they suffer by living near these farms, experiencing a lot of health impacts from these environmental degradations. And of course, our global population is experiencing really immense effects from climate change, like natural disasters, a heating planet, all of these things. And so um, I totally agree with you that having the definition and like the words to talk about how these things are impacting the other is really helpful. It's also one of my little tiny gripes with the One Health framework, and this isn't always how it's framed, but public health is a field that is very much focused on humans. It's focused on the public's health. And so oftentimes when we talk about One Health, we talk about it in a way that has it's like in a hierarchical way where humans are at the
Mhm.
top and, oh, we need to have a healthy environment and healthy animals in order for humans to be healthy. But I hope that we are coming into an era of time where we can really see that there's inherent value in having a healthy human population and a healthy environment and a healthy animal population. Those have inherent value as well, because simply because it's the right thing to do and it's the right thing to care about. There's not, there's no finite amount of caring or a finite amount of compassion that is only reserved for humans. I think we can care about all three of these things and more in order to have a thriving planet and not just for the benefit of humans.
I feel like people naturally are also just so selfish. Like everything we think about is just for the benefit of ourselves. And like ironically, a lot of the issues in this world right now are because of us. Like we created this farming system, and this farming system has led to a bunch of environmental things. Like at the end of the day, I feel like we are the culprits, but it always just seems like something else needs to give back to us. It gets very like sad to me. Like if you think about it more and more, you realize like we literally brought this problem upon every living thing on the planet, as always.
Yeah, I hear you. I actually, when I first started public health school, I my verbiage around it was like I told people I want to go to public health school because I think that I wanted to solve the issues of humans, animals, environment, ending factory farming, all of that. But my verbiage around it was like, I don't think that humans will make the changes needed in the world unless they see that it benefits them,
Mhm.
which I totally agree with you that like a lot of our problems in the world have started because of that, because humans see, oh, how will this benefit me? Will it make me more money? Will it make me more famous? Whatever. And throughout my time in public health school, as you can see, as I've just droned on and on for minutes, my perspective really shifted to no, we don't need more people doing what they think will benefit them. We need more people working on what will benefit the whole. And I think
Mhm.
that perspective shift hopefully will get us into a better um, ethos as as a nation, as a world.
Is that like, do you have any examples where you feel like One Health hasn't been accepted or has kind of been brushed
Mm.
off? I know you kind of talked about how we've always seen it as like a human benefit type of thing, but like, is there any things like for me, it's common sense. I'm like, wow, this is like such a great, straightforward approach. But I know if it were that easy, we'd see a lot more progress. Is there any challenges you think that public health has faced?
That's a great question. And I will say that like when I talk to students about One Health, when I talk to other people about it, it is such a graspable and like obvious thing that we should be working towards.
Mhm.
And then I think when it comes into practice for people creating policies, people working in public health, people working in government, whatever, I think the main barriers are time and resources, money. I think depending on the issue, um, there are so many uh, players that require, oh, but I need to make a profit, or I need the time and resources to like figure out what is the best policy decision for animals, humans, environment. Um, and I think I think One Health is also predominantly seen as disease prevention
Mhm.
and like yeah, like I said, like disease prevention for humans. Um, and I'm not sure if there's any fields where it's like not accepted or frowned upon. Um, but I think money and time are the two biggest barriers to actually implementing One Health solutions.
If you could have like just all the time, all the resources, everything was super ideal, like what is the first thing you would do in One Health? That's super broad. Maybe like if you had to pick something that you think would benefit all three in the same way,
Hmm.
like what would that look like?
Um, I think if I had all the money and time in the world, my I would eliminate factory farming, eliminate industrial animal agriculture, and I think that 99.9% of people would agree with that decision because of the extreme threats um, that factory farming poses for our planet and our health and the animals as well. I think um, factory farming is not something that was ever meant to be a permanent solution to farming. It started during World War II in the UK because of food shortages and all that, and it was supposed to be a really temporary thing. Um, and then as it's gotten bigger and more out of control, it's um, it's benefited monetarily um, a few people at the top, and it has only done harm to farmers, workers, farm workers, slaughterhouse workers, people in the community, and then of course the people, uh, anyone living on the planet experiencing climate change and higher risk of chronic diseases and all of that. Um, and so I think moving to a food system that is more um, focused on local and focused on plants and plant-based, not saying we all have to be vegan, but eliminating the factory farming system that is in play right now, that would be my first One Health solution. And also implementing a lot more education at a younger
Hmm.
age for everyone.
I feel like education is so important too, because really this fellowship is kind of the only place that I can think of that would really teach college students or grad students like anything about this field. I'm not sure how I would like change education system from like a younger age, but I I feel like it really does start when you're a kid. Because in my memory, my plate was the first thing that I thought of
Mhm.
going into nutrition and how meat has always been part of protein. Like I never really learned about other protein sources.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And when you think about like all of the ways that the food system touches the other systems in our country, like the education system, school lunch programs,
Hmm.
WIC, SNAP, the healthcare system, subsidies that are from the government that are given to farmers, like all of these things, economic systems, like the food system is so much at the core of all of these things. And sometimes I think about like if our let's say our country and our like various departments and systems are just a bicycle with many, many wheels. What would it take? What would be like the one pebble that gets into the spokes of the bicycle wheel that just kind of cranks everything into a different direction that makes all of those systems have to change gears and like and develop a new and better um, form of approach of working together or separate, who knows, but something that would benefit all three of the One Health categories.
Like I would think a pandemic, except that didn't change anything, I feel like. Because like a pandemic is like everyone experienced COVID. Everyone knew that this affected animals, this was affecting people. The environment was changing because we weren't really outside. If I'm not mistaken, I feel like everyone said like the air was so much clearer or cleaner because no one was like driving and going places. Like we know that the pandemic really changed our lives in a lot of ways, except I feel like we just kind of went back to normal and no one ever thought like we just kind of got over it, didn't really think, oh, where did this come from? What can
Mhm.
we do to prevent something like that? Bird flu is on the rise, as we know now. It's been affecting egg prices, which is a direct thing that consumers can see, but I still feel like that's not really conceptualized. People just kind of think like, oh, it's a market thing and it'll pass.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
I feel like it's very hard to get people to look into the root problems rather than just thinking something will pass.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And there's there's a lot of focus out there, like a lot of the information out there right now about bird flu is very much focused on um, egg prices, which
Hmm.
is the only thing that consumers have as a reference point to how is this affecting me, which
Right.
is exactly what we were saying about like humans will only change when they see that something is affecting them. Um, and so, yeah, and our systems, especially our food system right now, is so un it's like intangible a lot of times. It's really hidden from the general public. Um, for the most part, like there are some communities who drive by farms every day, but for the majority of the American population, we don't see where our food comes from
Hmm.
and where these animals are being kept. And I think that if more people could see it, it would just make it more real for people. I know that sounds like, simple, but yeah, a lot of people just don't know. They don't have an image in their mind of what these places look like.
And I feel like for you, because you had such a strong connection with strawberry, like you already had that as a kid, that this animal has feelings. This animal is very aware. It's not just like something that just sits there for our benefit or for our food source. A lot of people don't really have farm animals as pets. Usually we just have cats and dogs and
Mhm.
other animals. But I totally agree. I feel like a lot of people don't really see farm animals as the same type of animals as dogs and cats that
Yeah.
they have at home. And that really prevents them from understanding like where all of our issues are coming from. and how it's not just how are we benefiting or losing out. Egg prices are going up. Like, yeah, that's affecting us, but there are animals that are actually sick in
Yeah,
these CAFOs. It's not just some abstract thing that's affecting our egg prices.
exactly.
Hmm.
I had a question for you.
Hmm.
Wondering, I know you changed from nutrition and dietetics to food management.
Hmm.
Wondering what your, like, where you see One Health working or at play for you in food management. And
I feel like the idea of farm to table is a
Mhm.
very interesting concept. I feel it's portrayed as some luxury dining experience because a lot of the ingredients are usually more expensive. So that's been my conception or perception of it at least. But I think the concept of farm to table can go really far if it's done correctly. I know there's technicalities. I think you have to be within a certain mile radius for it to be considered farm to table. But if we started having more of those with local farmers who are farming a lot more responsibly and it's not these like massive factories, I think people will become to more like appreciate that type of food more rather than just it spawning on their plate. Like now, if you go out to a restaurant, it just kind of appears and you don't really think about where it came from. But when there's an emphasis on what farm it came from and maybe who runs the farm, what the farm looks like, um, I feel like people will be a lot more conscious about their eating patterns and food sourcing. Um, will I open a farm to table in the future? I don't know, but I think it's such a cool concept if it's done correctly. A lot of issues seem above our heads. Like we don't know what to do about them. Like we know there's a lot of things going on and how do we help? So I want to ask if you could give any tips to someone who's now interested in public health or interested about helping factory farming come to an end. What would be some tips you would give them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I was gonna try to make a really bad sarcastic joke about like, I don't know, there's not like a lot going on in the world right now. We don't need to be overwhelmed, but I didn't think that would land. So, yeah, there's a lot in the world right now and a lot of information that can just feel like you're drowning in an ocean and like you don't know where to focus your attention and
Mhm.
like you feel really helpless and you don't know what to do and how to spend your time and energy. And yeah, there are absolutely days where I feel like that too. I think the days when I feel most hopeful are the days where I focus on, you know, that phrase, think globally, act locally. So focusing on what you do have control over, what you do have in your power, and the things that you can change within your own life, in your own daily habits and whatever. And the slightly positive news is that what we choose to buy, like our purchasing power, has a ton of power, more power than we think. And so choosing to focus your dollars on more plant-based foods, not foods that are from a factory farm, really has a lot of power. We have seen when I first went vegan in high school, from whatever that was, 20 years ago, to now, there has been such incredible economic change in the market for plant-based foods, plant-based items in the grocery store. Um, like these giant companies investing in more plant-based foods and that's because our dollars are voting. They're telling them, where we want more products. And so the more that we can choose to buy more plant-based foods, um, the less money goes to these systems of oppression and harm that are CAFOs and factory farms. So um, that is really empowering because there's not a ton of other industries or like causes right now where you can really feel that impact really immediately. Um, the other thing that I would say is staying informed and finding your community. There's a lot going on in the world, and like creating community, staying, I was going to say staying social, but that sounds really dumb. Like staying connected to your people and like the people in your community. That's also public health, mental health, social health. Like that's also a really important part of public health. And so, yeah, I think those are two really, really important aspects is think globally and act locally.
That's all the questions that I have for today. I'm going to leave the floor open if there's anything you'd like to close with, any goals you might have, maybe, or just like any final thoughts.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me today, Stephanie. This was really fun, and I'm glad I could chat with you and get to know you a little more. My last thought, I know that some of this information can be scary or overwhelming, and like exactly what we were talking about just now, feeling like in an ocean, drowning in information. And what the main takeaway that I want people to have whenever I talk to them about this is like, One Health is a really important lens to have, and that it's so easy to be able to take it into whatever field you go into. And it can be really easy to practice in whatever classes you're going into, whether you're in finance or um, policy or public health or theater or whatever. Like there's once you start thinking about it and thinking about this particular lens of incorporating like environmental health and animal health all into whatever work you're doing, you'll see so many more opportunities to bring this lens and this kind of work into your daily life, into your routines, and I think that's going to be the way that we really create impactful change is like not only through our legislators and policymakers, that's important too, but also like really big, robust mass change. And I think that'll be the lasting change.
Well, thank you so much. I'm more excited than you are for you to be on here. This has been amazing. I feel like when I met you first in October, um, there was so many foundational things that you introduced me to, and this conversation just really helped dive deeper into a lot of it. Gives me a lot to simmer on as well, not just the viewers that are going to watch this, but thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie.